We'll begin in a couple of seconds. Let's begin, Sukhdevji. Namaste, friends, and we welcome Sukhdevji again on behalf of United Consciousness. We are studying along with Sukhdevji is guiding us on the concept of self-control. It is the fifth session. And in four sessions, Sukhdevji guided us through the concept of manas and chittam. He also mentioned about that when mind can't think of two things simultaneously, that's why it is better that we can put mind on something else. There are many ways of doing it. One is mindfulness. Second is you can focus your mind on divine thoughts. Third is pratipaksha bhavna, thinking of the opposite. And fourth is thinking something else. How to deal with chitta. Sukhdevji also mentioned about the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic tendencies in the last class. He mentioned that whatever tendency you have, even if you are introvert or extrovert, or if you have a personality type where you are high energy, few days you are low energy. And Sukhdevji mentioned a word of it, but I could not catch the exact word. So I'll request him also to write in the chat box that particular word, in cyclotime, I guess, something. And then Sukhdevji also mentioned that whether you are optimistic or pessimistic, you need to assure that you are developing sattvic qualities in you. So with that note, Sukhdevji has mentioned that today he may be, thank you Sukhdevji that you wrote in the chat box. Today Sukhdevji will take us on the journey of Vat, Kapha and Pitta also. So we welcome all of you on behalf of United Consciousness. Over to respected Sukhdevji.
Hari Om and Namaste. I'm very happy to speak again on self-control, and I'm happy to be with you again, and thank you for inviting me here. It's the last session of this session, but maybe next year something else will follow, and definitely from United Consciousness has other courses which are excellent in developing different divinities, meaning good qualities and good divines, to remove the divides that divide human being from other human beings, human being from nature, human being from some higher purpose. And when you talk about self-control, there's one important text the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, and I want to introduce today a little more about this text. In my first session, I talked a little bit about it, but before I want to first talk a little about dosha and prakriti and the Ayurvedic concept. Let me just share the screen. Most of you will be quite familiar with it. So in Ayurveda, we have three different doshas, which are called Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And you might know it has lots to do with health and with constitution of the body. And there's so much what the Ayurvedic doctors will say about it. But you can also take it from a psychological point of view. Some people are more Vata type, some are more Pitta type, some are more Kapha type. And Vata, from the point of view of psychology, is light temperament. You can deal with others quite easily, and you're very happy with others. You have lots of ideas, lots of creativity, and always liking to do something else. Could say that's the extrovert Vata type. And then you have the Pitta type, and the Pitta type is fire. He has enthusiasm. He wants to do things. He has a plan, creates a plan, and then just do it. Not thinking too much about it, but just do it. Pitta. And then you have Kapha, And the Kapha type is more earth. You could say Vata is like air and ether, Pitta is fire, and Kapha is water and earth. You could again say of Vata you have two different types. You could say there's the extrovert Vata and introvert Vata. The extrovert Vata is a little bit like I described it, then the pure extrovert person, and then you have the introvert Vata. He's also a little bit fearful and afraid, and he feels, and somehow in German you say you hear the grass grow, and so it's some subtle things you feel. And the Pitta, you also have again, you have extrovert and introvert. You could say the extrovert is full of enthusiasm, and he is a good leader and tells people what to do, and has this energy and makes others do it. The introvert, he's the one who can work for hours and hours, and he sometimes has the feeling, I have to do everything. So he is strong and determination. And the Kapha type, again, you have some more extrovert. You could say he is, just try to find the proper English word for it. You just take that. Is a little bit of coziness, so he's nice to others. He doesn't forget, the Kapha person doesn't forget a birthday. He's more social, makes sure nobody works too hard, takes care of everybody. And if the Kapha person is with a Pitta person, makes sure that the Pitta person also stops working and goes home, makes sure that the Vata person doesn't get too airy and spacey. So you have the extrovert Kapha person. And then you also have the introvert Kapha person, and that is the rule person. So he knows what are the rules and the procedures, and wants to have, first you have the plan, and then you have to think about it, and then you have to take the rule book and you have to think, will that violate anything? So now, when we talk about self-control, it's helpful to know, do you have any tendency to be more like Vata, Pitta, or Kapha? And then you can think about, how can you use it in a positive way? Like the extrovert Kapha person is very wonderful dealing with all others. But of course, there's the other side of extrovert Kapha Vata person, not being dependable, not following your promises, starting things and not following them up. Now, if you know this tendency of yours, then you have two possibilities. Either, or three possibilities. Yeah, well, I always start things and nothing will come out of it. That's one possibility. Second is, you develop some self-control and you use a certain degree of stability. If your mind immediately wants to do something else, you can say, stop, I first want to finish that project. Or a third possibility, you surround yourself by somebody who is more Pitta or Kapha temperament. And the Pitta, he will sometimes get angry at you, and the Kapha person will try to stop you or make you not fly away. But then you can be successful. Again, the Pitta person, the extrovert Pitta person, he's an excellent leader, but sometimes he can be demanding too much of others. And or the introvert Pitta person always sometimes feels frustrated. Nobody else does as much as him, and he always has to do everything. So self-control would mean here, be more compassionate towards others, and sometimes let go of control. Especially the introvert Pitta person wants to control everything, give others responsibility and let them do. And self-control for Pitta person also means don't get too angry. For Vata person, even though he's extrovert, or if he's outgoing, or he has that introvert person, you have to see if Vata goes too high, then you get fear. So fear is like when the Vata gets too high, then you get full of fear. Now, if you know that you have a tendency for high Vata and you feel somehow you get anxious, you get afraid and so on, then you need to reduce your Vata a little bit by having regular food times, by having regular habits, by doing meditation every day at the same time, by doing every day some deep relaxation technique, something to get more calm and also to get grounded. So asanas would also be excellent. Of course, you will always hear me recommend doing asana, pranayama, meditation. I will always find new reasons for you to do them. But for the Vata person, you do it to get grounded and to get little, how would you say, settled. And the Pitta person who has a tendency to get too fiery, he has to learn, if he feels like angry, frustrated and so on, he knows, oops, my Pitta goes too high. I should lower my Pitta. And the Pitta can be lowered by taking half a day off. The true Pitta person can never take a whole day off. That would be like too much. If he's at home, he will start renovating the apartment or doing this and that. He will always find something or try to make his son better student and do his homework, and always something useful the Pitta person wants to do. But if it's too much Pitta, he'll get angry and frustrated and nobody wants to be with this person. And finally, he can end up in burnout. So if the Pitta person somehow notices, yes, I get into this mood of angry frustration, I take half a day off, I use a little more time with deep relaxation techniques, I take meditation, or whatever I do a little more without wanting to achieve anything. Not just just being in a more relaxed way. Relaxation is important. Sometimes also chanting of mantras is very helpful here. Now the Kapha person has a tendency to get too grounded and too much steady. Like if you get too cozy, somehow nothing will get done and others will feel you don't do enough. Or if you're too rule bound, you somehow strangle others. So they feel they get choked in your presence. So you need to have some lightness and you need to have some fire and some air, you would say. So that's part of the self-control. You know in which direction your temperament goes. Yes, somebody adds correctly, Pitta is composed of fire and water, and it has 70% fire and 30% water. I hypersimplify now, so I beg for forgiveness, those who know a little bit more. And of course, he has organizational skills and thinking skills, so he has that part. So self-control would not mean you know which tendency you have, and then notice when you go in too much into one tendency, and then just lower this Vata, Pitta or Kapha. Now, not everybody is 100% or is strongly only Vata, Pitta or Kapha. Even though usually they say it's somehow you're born with a certain tendency, my experience is maybe 1/3 has one tendency and it stays the same on the psychological level. On the physical body is something else, because if you have a certain bone structure, this will not change in your during time. But in the mental level, 1/3 has a certain temperament and it stays, and it says, and maybe 1/3, sometimes this, sometimes that, and the other third has, after a few years, something else comes there. And of course, you can always have excess of any dosha if you do too much. Like if you have lots to do with all the time different Zoom meetings, deal with different people all the time, talk a lot, then Vata you will have excess. Or if you have big projects which have to be done and you have energy and you do it and so on, Pitta will get into excess. And sometimes when you got maybe some disease and you had to take rest in the bed, you might get too much in a kapha and you stay in that mood for too long. So one part is to check that and change it. Now, of course, the second part of self-control is often dealing with others. Like when you know the person next to you, you could say, she's not dependable. Or you could say, extrovert Vata. Of course, she has problems being dependable. She's a Vata person. So instead of expecting a Vata person to be 100% dependable, it's better I see he or she is like that. And if I need some favor to be done, I send that Vata person somewhere around the office floor, and then this person will find somebody who knows somebody. Like we have in United Consciousness, there are some who know everybody, and there are others who know fewer. And and there are some, I can ask this person, this person, this person, this person, and that's how you connect. It's extrovert Vata. And sometimes the real extrovert Vata, they will not come back to you. You have to remind them a few times, and then they'll do it. And so instead of talking about not being dependable, you can say, it's an extrovert Vata, that is his or his tendency. Or if you have somebody in your team or in your family who is Pitta, is fiery, and he always wants to achieve something, he's never happy. You achieved something and immediately has the next project and wants to do this and again, and never happy with anybody, always wanting more. You could either say he's intolerant, he's impossible. It's a Pitta type. It's good that he's there, and he'll help us that our team will be successful, and he organizes everything. Or if you have a Kapha person, especially of the cozy type, you could say, such a lazy person. Or you could say, wonderful, there's a Kapha person in my team, makes sure that everybody feels happy, everybody has something to eat, no birthday is missed, the group stays together. If you have this kind of Kapha person in the team, you have half as many sick persons in your team, everybody will be more healthy, and then everything is fine. So in that way, if one puts a team together, it's actually good to have Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. It's good to have extrovert and introvert people, and then you somehow honor everybody for their special temperament. So these are something about temperament in Vata, Pitta, Kapha, which is psychology. I'm not talking here about the physical aspects, and when it comes to medicine, that's a much more complicated issue. Now, I wanted, as it's self-control, and there's the most important text on self-control is the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. I did speak about Yoga Sutra of Patanjali in the beginning of this 5-week session, a text which is probably 1,600 or 1,700 years old. The Indologists change the date every few years, a few hundred years forward or backwards. Anyhow, it's an ancient text, and it's called the basic text on Raja Yoga. And Raj means to control and to rule. And Raja Yoga wants to help us to control and to rule. And maybe at some point we might do some longer course on the Yoga Sutra, and it's 200 verses. But you can also study a little bit with this text to learn a little bit more about the science of self-control. There are 4 chapters. First chapter is called Samadhi Pada. Pada, as you might all know, means foot. It also means chapter. In many of the classical works, if they have 4 chapters, it's called Pada. Good. Sometimes it's called Upadesha, like in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, also has 4 chapters, but here it's called Pada, which also means 4 feet. And you could also start the Yoga Sutra by studying the 2nd chapter or even the 4th chapter. Every chapter stands a little bit on its own. First chapter is called Samadhi Pada. Samadhi means superconscious. Is the chapter how to reach the superconscious state. But the first chapter is not just about Samadhi, but it's also about certain basic concepts, how you control the mind. Some say the first chapter is theory of mind control. But again, it's more than just the theory. You also have practices there. The 2nd chapter is called Sadhana Pada. Sadhana means spiritual practice. This means here spiritual practices are described, and there are 3 types of spiritual practices described in the 3rd chapter. And maybe I'll talk about these 3 types of sadhanas which are described. So if you say the 2nd chapter, you first have the so-called Kriya Yoga. And then you could say is dealing with karma and avidya. Let me say, or maybe I tell it better as Viveka Kyati. I think that is the main.
Sudhirji, we can't see it.
Yes, thank you. Okay, 2nd chapter. It has for Kriya Yoga, Viveka Kyati, and Ashtanga. Now, when we take, maybe I should make it a little bigger. Okay, anyhow, so we have these Kriya Yoga in Raja Yoga means tapas, Svadyaya, and Ishvara Pranidhana. Ashtanga means Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, and dharana and dhyana. So tapas means do effort. Tapas means discipline. Sometimes tapas is translated as austerity. And in the context of the niyamas, tapas means austerity. But in the context of Kriya Yoga, you could say it means do effort. Tapas means auch heat. This means do something with enthusiasm. So the second is Svadyaya, and Svadyaya here means self-study. In the context of the niyamas, where Svadyaya is also mentioned, Svadyaya also means study of sacred scriptures. Study yourself, the Upanishad, the Yoga Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutra, and other texts. In the context of the Kriya Yoga, you would say Svadyaya means study yourself and learn to understand. And then comes Ishvara Pranidhana. And Ishvara Pranidhana means devotion towards God. That's how it's explained in the context of the niyamas. Here you could also say is letting go and having faith that God will conclude. Now, in the context of self-control, means you study your mind, you learn a little bit about yourself, you learn a little bit about the situation, you learn a little bit about the other person. Like I mentioned about the temperament, extrovert, introvert, I mentioned about Vata, Pitta, Kapha. There is certain types of Svadyaya you understand, or you learn to understand your own mind. As one said, desires are suggestions for action with energy, or emotion is knowledge with suggestion for action plus energy. You understand all that, and then you don't need to act on it immediately. But sometimes you have to do something. This means tapas, whether you like it or not. Self-control also means you do things which are right if you like it or not. Of course, you can do Svadyaya in the sense of, and you can do tapas not only physically, but you can make auto-suggestions, you can visualize, you do affirmation, you can do miracle questions. How would I do it with energy? I have this and this to do. How would I do it full of joy and happiness? Or supposedly I could do it with joy. How would I go about it? So all that is forms of tapas. And sometimes we have to just let go and say, oh God, please take over. Now before this Zoom session, I had another Zoom session in Germany where I was just, I'm always sitting here, I was just saying, no, I'm going to India and to Italy and to Turkey and to other countries. And there it was more for some of our community here and in other ashrams. And there was one lady saying she was in a responsible situation. We were talking about some verses on the Shvetashvatara Upanishad and some commentary that was saying one should also develop lightness. I said it's not always easy if the situation is difficult, and she said, well, the way she does it, she does whatever she does as well as she can, this we could say tapas, with enthusiasm and fire, and she tries to think about it, you could say Svadyaya, and then in the evening I say, Swami Shivananda, I dedicate everything to you, and now you take over. And then I feel very light. So you have all these three aspects. And she's very efficient in what she's doing and 100% dedicated. and she has a lot of worries on her shoulders, but she has this lightness in herself. Now the second series of practices that Patanjali suggests in the second chapter is Viveka Kyati. That means a state of continuous discrimination. To a certain degree, when we talked about buddhi and using your intellect, it's a little bit Viveka Kyati involved. It's a long theme, and he talks about different kinds of vivekas. You have to have discrimination between the eternal and the non-eternal, discrimination between the self and the non-self, discrimination between the true happiness and the seeming happiness, discrimination between the real and the unreal. And then he comes to the part of the Yoga Sutra, which is probably the most known part for most yoga practitioners, the Ashtangas, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, and Dhyana. Now, if you know yoga, you've heard about these. And if you don't know yoga, it's too short of a time to talk more about it. So I will skip these 8. And then we come to the third chapter, which is the Vibhuti Pada. Vibhuti is often translated as divine powers. Like also you have the Vibhuti Yoga as a chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. I think it's the 10th chapter. But in Patanjali, it's not the divine qualities of God and the wonderful, the beauty in nature and so on, which is the Vibhuti Yoga, seeing the greatness everywhere. But Vibhuti Pada means you develop your mental capacities, and the main technique is concentrate your mind. And then basically use dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, and then you get many different capacities. For example, if you want to learn a little, if you want to have, you could say, telepathic abilities to understand somebody else, then learn to connect your heart to the heart of the other person. Concentrate on the heart of the other person and feel this heart with all your attention, and then you'll understand the other person more. Or, if another possibility to understand others is concentrate 100% on their sounds or when they speak. Like most people, when they hear somebody, and they just wait for the moment they can interrupt and say what they want to say. Or they very early they judge it's good or not good. It corresponds to what you know or what you don't know. But in Vibhuti Pada, Patanjali suggests full concentration. And even, for example, if you have somebody, a colleague or your boss or your mom or your dad, they always seem to say the same things. You can concentrate on the sound of what they say, not really in the contents of what they say, but the sound of what they say, and then you get an intuitive understanding. Then he also says, if you concentrate on the moment and its consequences, then you understand the future. So most people are too much thinking about the future and the past, and that's how they're not in the presence. But if you're fully concentrated in the presence, then intuitively you will understand quite a lot. And so there are a lot of verses in the third chapter, how you can use your mind for good qualities, vibhutis. Of course, then you have also siddhis like making yourself small and big and so on. You can interpret it as parapsychological powers, or you can say you develop your psychological powers. Highly fascinating subject, but I'll go to the next part. And the next chapter is called Kaivalya Pada. Kaivalya means liberation. In this chapter, the theme is how can you reach liberation? Actually, you would also say all chapters go on liberation. Even if you just practice the first chapter, it goes to samadhi, asamprajñata samadhi, which is liberation. In the second chapter, you go to liberation by asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. In the third chapter, also Patanjali also goes to samadhi. In the fourth chapter, he goes to the Kaivalya Pada. In the fourth chapter, he also says, it gets into some, you could say, philosophical aspects. For example, he talks about there's a sense of individuality that constructs the mind to follow. So he says there's only one consciousness in all beings, but there is some individuality, asmita, which creates the illusion that there is some individual. And so he says it's as consciousness is one, but it branches out into many different types of activities due to innumerable thought waves. And then he says, when uncovering your mind from all desires through meditation, then you realize your true self. And he says, the awakened yogi's actions are neither pure nor impure, neither moral nor immoral. They come out of his intuitions. But the actions of others are threefold: pure, impure, or mixed. Or you can say threefold can also mean, of course, sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Well, basically he says, if we reach a state which is beyond the mind, then we know intuitively what has to be done. Then we don't think about is that right or not right, but it flows in a pure way through us. But to come to that state, we'll have to also discriminate what is right, what is not right, what is dharmic, what is adharmic, what is sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. And we do the right thing. That's why we need self-control. But self-control is not a goal by itself, but it's a means to the goal to really reach that liberation. He talks about birth and rebirth. So he says, well, what we don't reach in this life, we'll reach in our next life. Then he talks about past, present, and futures are only in the gunas. When you go beyond gunas, there's no more time for you. Then he says, the same object is seen differently by different minds, depending entirely on the development of each mind. So 10 people are in the same situation, everybody sees it differently. It's not the situation itself which is the most important thing, but you yourself can change a lot. So instead of lamenting about some developments, it's best to change your attitude towards it. And finally, you have the last verse, and in that last verse, he just says, Kaivalya, liberation, comes when the yogi has fulfilled all the aims in life and he has transcended all gunas. All goals and gunas are involuted and return to their source. Consciousness is established in its real nature, iti. That's it. So how will you get to liberation? Well, first you have to basically have fulfilled the aims of your life, which also means you have dharma, you have duty, you have artha, certain aims in your mind. The expression artha has so many different meanings. Here it means you have fulfilled the meanings of your life. And you have your artha shunyana. So you are liberated from all of future goals that you need. And you're gunanam pratiprasava. You have transcended all the gunas. And then comes kaivalya. Also kaivalya comes when you as Purusha are freed from all different goals which you think is unachieved, when you go beyond all the gunas. And then you reach Kaivalya, the state of liberation, and you have reached Svarupa Pratishta, you're established in your true nature. And then it's also qualified by Chitta, Chitti, Chitta Shakti Shaktir Itihi. This means the Chitta is quiet, you have achieved all the energy, but you are beyond it, and Iti means that's it. Okay, so to summarize, I think first there's some question in the chat, if I noticed properly. Is it possible for the doshas to be in balance, especially if one is awakened, constantly aware of his attributes, doshas, and the inner voids lead him to do what is necessary to keep it balanced? You have the three dosha type person who has a balance of all the three doshas. But you can also talk about, can also say, most people have one temperament stronger than others. And you can reach God realization even if you have more pitta, fiery type, or if you're more a vata person. And you could also see that self-realized saints, and you could also say some are more pitta, some are more vata, some are more kapha, but they go beyond their prakriti. Dr. Vikranji just asked me to speak more on a guna tita. Gunas are the three qualities, and the tita is the one who goes beyond these three qualities. So when we speak about self-control, first is you learn to see the different gunas, and then you try to, and that you tapas, you increase sattva, you decrease tamas, so take care of your diet, so no meat, no alcohol, and so on, and you watch your words and everything, so you increase sattva. But in the end, you also have to go beyond sattva, because you're not even you don't want to be bound by sattva. So, and that is also meant when Patanjali then speaks, you go beyond all the goals of life, you go beyond all, even the good and the bad. You don't see good and bad anymore, but it's all manifestation of the divine. Doesn't mean that the self-realized saint is unethical. He's highly ethical, but it comes natural through him. If anybody still has a question, or I hope lots of questions are there, but wants to ask a question, then you can either write in the chat or unmute yourself and ask the question.
Sukhdevji, till any question comes, I loved the way you mentioned about somebody in your ashram, how she used to do tapa, swadhyaya, and Ishwar pranidhan together. If you can speak about the same in one line, it will be a very good summary of those three concepts. You may need to unmute, Sukhdevji.
There are, in the Kriya Yoga of Patanjali, 3 steps, tapas. Do something intensely. Do it as good as you can. Do it with Svadyaya. So this means study and do it intelligently. And try to understand yourself, others involved, the task that is to be done. Could also make a different sequence. Probably best is first to do some Svadyaya. You understand. Second is you act, and you act intensely. You give your heart 100% tapas. And then you let go. If you have some master to whom you have a strong connection, you dedicate everything to the master, or you can dedicate it to some aspect of God or the Divine Mother, or to whatever higher power you have. Or you just say, I let go. That is, in the end, Ishvara Pranidhana. And that's the recipe to do intelligent actions, Svadyaya. You really achieve something, tapas, and you let go, Ishvara Pranidhana.
Sir, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Sir, is it not possible that by properly organizing the diet and other exercises, one can go beyond the doshas, means get rid of the doshas?
Yes, of course. Now in the Ayurvedic system, there's certain diet you can take to remove too much dosha, or you can do special asanas and other exercises. You can purification exercises. So there's a lot more that you can do. Yes.
Means it is not that only scriptural practice is necessary, or it is a must along with the diet, etc. Only with regulating diet and exercise also one can get rid of the doshas.
Yes, also dosha. So diet plays a very important role. Yes. So thank you for adding that. That's important consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so to summarize, self-control is an important ability, capacity that we can develop. Self-control is important for health, for success in whatever undertaking. Self-control is important to make progress on the spiritual path. Of course, self-control is not the only part. There's love, maitri, compassion towards others, bhakti, love towards God, proper knowledge, jnana, enthusiasm, creativity, so many other parts, which also United Consciousness will offer some courses on. So many different things to develop, but self-control is something which you can achieve bit by bit. And even in trying to develop self-control, it's first important to understand yourself and others, then to practice and make effort. So after Svadyaya comes tapas, and then you let go. So thank you very much for participating. Thank you for Dr. Vikranchi for coordinating everything and the theme. And I wish you all the best. And maybe we see each other at the United Consciousness Conclave, big global event, and maybe Dr. Vikranchi will say a few words about that.
Thank you, respected Sukhdevji. I'm so delighted that I could become a part of this discourse on self-control. And in one session, you could manage to summarize Vat, Pitta, Kapha, and all 4 chapters of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. It is such inspiring. Thank you very much, respected Sukhdevji. And with your permission, I would like to invite all of you in the forthcoming global event on 11th, 12th, 18th, and 19th of December.
You muted yourself, Dr. G.
In the chat box, I just wrote the website where you can register for this global event Sukhdevji was mentioning. United Consciousness is organizing United Consciousness Conclave on 11th, 12th, 18th, and 19th of December, where spiritual masters, life coaches from all parts of the world are coming together. Around 100 country delegates will be there together to discuss various aspects of spiritual interest and day-to-day living. So I welcome all of you to register yourself. There are no charges to register. You need to go to the website and register yourself for the program. And before we close this program today, it is comfortable for anybody of you to switch on the camera so that we can have a group photograph for remembrance sake. And if it is convenient, switch on the camera. I will have a group photograph before we
I think Dr. Vikranchi just became quiet. Okay, so I took some photograph. So thank you for being part of it. So I wish you all the best, happiness, and much of joy, and whatever your spiritual path is, progress
Please send us
on
the
this path.
photograph in mail.
Bye-bye. Everybody, namaste.
Namaste, Hari Om. Dr. Vikranchi is there again, but it's muted again.
I'm sorry, I lost connection in between, it seems. So should we have a group photograph once again? Okay, many people.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Maybe whoever can to switch on camera would be nice.
Fine. So I will click 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Sukhdevji.
Please send us the photo.
Okay. Perfect. Mohsin, if you can, please.
You can send in the mail.
Yes. It can be sent in the mail along with the certificate for the people who have attended it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Namaste. Thank you, Sukhdevji.
Thank you.